Last Man Home. On the Sky Road. Written by John Miro. Part 13. So we didn't die. Long story short, yes, we arrived at Gallus a little late. Yes, Griss's lawyer made a little coin hammering out a deal to keep us out of jail. And yes, the reactor core lost containment, obviously. And it was messy. We were dead in space. Engine-wise. Otherwise, our cruise ship kept on rockin'. Sorry for this terrible inconvenience. Did we mention the booze is now free? And have you tried your luck at our lovely casino? Here are some free chips. For the rest of the passengers, at least. Not for me and the boys. We got locked in our rooms. When we figured out that the room service was on the house, we did our best to leave a tab that would get somebody in really hot water. When the management finally let us out of our rooms, my fingers were sore. From signing documents, non-disclosure agreements, and from flipping off every officer as I passed by. All I saw was uniforms. The ship had been cleared out, and the reporters quizzing passengers about their ordeal set adrift in space with an open bar tab were all long gone before they unlocked our door. The only officer I did want to see on that ship, I never saw again. Security Chief Priya Whitaker never answered any of the calls or messages me and the boys sent her way in the days after what Griss took to calling the Big Fizzle. When we finally reached Gallus, a football league's worth of officers lined up to walk us off the ship. They'd already tossed our bags down the ramp after us into a little puddle of light in the otherwise pitch-dark terminal. The place was huge, part cattle factory, part customs office, part tourist trap. It was also closed for the night, and the sun was on the other side of the planet. Glowing exit strips on the ground showed us the clear way to the door they wanted us to go through soonest, so no one would catch us on camera leaving. We'd signed away our right to talk up our story any other way already. We didn't put you in jail. You keep your mouth shut about why, and don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out. Thanks for the ride, Griss called over his shoulder as he smoothed the lapels of a pinstripe suit that probably cost more than all our tickets on the luxury cruise ship in the first place. Your scotch sucks, by the way. Boo! Teddy turned and shouted from halfway down the ramp. I watched some guards flinch, some others skitter back a step, and I chuckled along with Teddy's hiss laugh. So about that Big Fizzle. We got the bulkhead down just before all the safety protocols lost their battle against all Drew's damage. That still left the ship stranded in space, waiting for a tow to our final destination. The Sky Road waived all the passengers' bills and opened the bar so none of our fellow passengers cared enough about the unfortunate delay to figure out that a Samadon the security chief had ordered illegally assaulted and terrified half out of his mind had plumb near got them all cremated. The corporate overlords knew they were responsible, so they were working overtime to keep it quiet. They were so eager to keep it that way that the charges against Drew for reckless endangerment and the laundry list against me, Teddy, and Griss were never filed. I'd planned a big sob story to give to whatever judge they might stand us up in front of. Basically, it boiled down to this. The next time the big bad world tossed a curveball at me and mine, I was going to think things through, not default to fighting things through. I meant those words. I'd spent too much time in my cabin in the woods after the war to end up in a cell as soon as I gave up my hermit ways because I couldn't keep a lid on my crazy. I wasn't going to let that happen. Besides, I knew damn well these boys needed me. God help them if I was the best they could do to keep them out of trouble. And God help me if I let them down. Drew was doing better than any of us. We'd gotten him 3 days drunk and gotten him talking. And all of us had worked out a way together to keep him from being imported back to his homeworld. That was practically a death sentence for his kind, now that he was out of the mercenary game. It mostly involved us promising even more legal liability and what amounted to a reverse restraining order. One of us would always be around to keep him from getting someone hurt or dead, or lots of someone's hurt or dead. Griss and some holographic floating lawyer heads assured us they could make it hold up, and we went back to drinking and healing. Drew was a mess at first, but all the time with us locked in that suite turned him around. Our buddy, Tom, had already been locked in there when we arrived. Apparently, exigent circumstances overrode his contract for a room of his own. We didn't argue. We were glad to see him. Leaving Tom alone the night before had been preying on my mind. Tom was a stranger here, a kind soul. It was good to see him again. Yeah, the days we spent in that suite were good for us all. Not gonna say the place didn't start to get ripe after a week more before we were towed into Gallus orbit. Even then, it didn't exactly smell terrible. Kind of smelled like home. And by home, I mean the bare steel walls of the troop transports every soldier called home during the war. By the time we left, Drew was his goofy self again, eager to be getting off that ship with us, but happy. Teddy was still sore they were getting away with knocking our buddy out and hacking off a tentacle, but one of the conditions of us not being charged was his promise not to reveal how the Skyroad's piss-poor security let him use a simple backdoor exploit to open the security doors into the crew section, or how Drew had been able to leave a trail of blood all his scared-ass way into the ship's reactor core unchallenged and armed. Tom was his same sweet, culturally clueless self. A polite stranger in a strange land. Gris emerged from the suite showered, cologned up, and dressed to the nines, of course, and unflappable behind his steel-rimmed Coke bottle glasses. I think he actually got the Skyroad lawyers to pay him, on top of dropping charges, too. The benefits of having lawyers on retainer, I guess. When I stepped off the bottom of the ramp, I turned around and balled my fists on my hips. "Okay, we're off," I bellowed. "So where is he already?" I didn't get an answer, but saw a tubby guy wearing Priya's old chief of security badge tap a panel on the airlock, murmur something into it, and listen. "This is Lieutenant Tom's planet," Drew asked, rubbing one flesh-and-blood tentacle against a deactivated but not hacked-off military surplus tentacle. "The first, Tom?" He corrected himself out loud, quickly. "Yeah, buddy, this is Gallus," Teddy said, and tossed his bags at Drew, who took them without complaint. "I hear the place is a little old-fashioned." "Well," I called up again. The conga line in the airlock ignored me, but a boatload of whispers echoed down to the terminal floor, all versions of, "They're bringing out the bug." Typical. Tom had slept through it all when the rest of us almost blew up their ship, but the butler monkeys were still more afraid of him than they were of us. "It's a redneck backwater, that's what this is," Gris muttered, shaking a screen in the air over his head. It gave a sad little no-signal bloop, and he stuffed it back in his pocket and looked at me. "Jake should feel right at home." "You think?" A familiar voice purred from the shadows. I looked up, and Priya Whitaker walked into the circle of light. She had on a well-worn leather jacket. Her hands were in her pockets, and jeans had taken the place of her uniform. A big red visitor sticker stuck about where her badge used to be. "Pretty sure this rock is even lower rent than our friend here." She smirked at me. Teddy high-fived her. Drew oohed at the smack talk and grinned at me, waiting for the follow-up. I didn't have any kind of follow-up. Teddy, Gris, and Drew all watched and waited. Whitaker did, too. So I pointed at the visitor sticker on her civilian clothing. She walked towards me, thrusting her chest out. "You like him, huh?" I coughed on my own spit. "No," I did a double take. "I mean, yes." Hisses and chuckles into hands all around from the boys at that one. "I just meant, visitor?" "Sure you did." Priya shook her head, that sly grin of hers growing, then turned as she backed herself up beside me at the bottom of the ramp. "I quit." She cocked her head and thought. "No, first I arrested the old chief." She cocked a finger like a gun and shot it at Drew. "Then I tight-beamed the arrest record into the Gov database, so Skyroad lawyers couldn't quash it." She mimicked blowing smoke out of an imaginary gun barrel, then pretend holstered said imaginary gun on her hip. "Then I quit." I laughed. The lady had style. "And you waited around for us?" Why not?" She spun back to me. "Least you can do now is get me drunk, and you promised me sex." I blinked. "No, I flung my hands up towards her before she could open her mouth to argue. "Fine, it was implied." I felt a happy grin taking over my face. "You torch your career for a role. Least I can do is oblige." She gave a quick little nod. Glad that's settled. One long, promising gaze later, Whitaker turned back to Gris. "And putting me up for a few days is the least you can do. What with me saving all your friends' asses." Gris nodded, and I looked around. I saw smiles plastered on everyone's faces, even Gris. No one argued with that. Last Man Home. On the Sky Road. Written and recorded by John Miro. Stay tuned.